All right, we're going to start at 12 o'clock. Okay, that slide's a lie. It's just the first of many.
It's a lot more professional than mine was.
All right, I'm going to delegate to Richard. Richard, you can do that slide for me.
Oh, geez, yeah. Where's that bus come from? Yeah, awesome. Hey, hi, people. Nice to, I guess, virtually see you guys here. It's been a little while. I'd love to say it's because of COVID-19, but really it's because I was slack and had other things going on, I guess. One thing you would have noticed, I guess, is that the user group name has changed. We are no longer the Azure DevOps user group. We are now the GitHub, Brisbane GitHub user group. Lots of reasons for that. I'm sure Anthony will delve a bit more into some of those reasons as he goes through his talk today. Because of COVID-19, obviously, this has forced us to change the way we do things. And as a consequence, this is the first of our new online meetings. As far as the scheduling is concerned, Anthony was only available at 12 o'clock today because apparently he's busy. Well, one of the benefits I guess we have now with the online stuff is that we can play around with the times, that you don't actually physically need to be there. I'd still like to get back to that, maybe once every 2 months actually have a physical meeting, but having the flexibility of having an online meeting, I think is a good thing. So we'll play around with it all. We'll ask you guys for feedback as to whether you prefer a morning or whether lunchtime's a good time or evenings or whatever. We'll endeavour to record these as well and put them back up on our YouTube channel as well as soon as we can. And yeah, so what's the next slide, Anthony?
No idea.
Awesome. I'll hand it back to you then.
Thank you. So in terms of the rename, I guess one of our goals in choosing to do that wasn't to ignore Azure DevOps. It wasn't to be misinterpreted as we don't care about Azure DevOps at all. I'll give more insight into some of the rationale behind that, but we're not deserting the Azure DevOps community at all. That's Richard and I as organizers of the meetup group, but also putting my Microsoft hat on. We're absolutely not deserting Azure DevOps users. So one of my goals for today is to talk about our Azure DevOps and GitHub futures, how they can tie together, and to answer any questions. So as we would in the Brisbane office when we're holding in-person meetings, if you've got a question, heck, if you just want to heckle, please just open the mic and talk. So I think it's important that, particularly with a lot of the social isolation today, if you do have a question or something, please just jump in and chat. Okay. If you can see in the background there, as someone that over the last 10 years has averaged over 240,000 kilometers in the air each year, I'm kind of missing it. So my virtual background is actually an airport lounge to make me think that I'm actually getting a little bit of travel in there. That photo was taken last year in Qatar. That particular airport, amazing. That's one of 7 lounges they've got. So yeah, it was pretty cool. Richard's going to keep an eye on the chat for me in case anyone chooses to use the chats instead of speaking up, which you're very, very, very welcome to do. All right, so there might be a couple of new names there. So by way of introduction, my name is Anthony Borton. I'm a DevOps architect on the Microsoft DevOps CAT team. And that means I'm part of the product group that builds Azure DevOps. And I've worked with this team now for a couple of years. And Azure DevOps is going really well. It is gaining popularity. So the usage, the active engaged user count is increasing. Heck, even TFVC is increasing. So that's really, really good. I'm going to give you some insight through this session today. One of those insights is, hang on, I was getting too hot, so I took it off. Hang on, let's do this. So I actually joined GitHub, and this is my official hoodie, so it's got my GitHub handle on the sleeve. There it is, swag. So I joined GitHub on the 1st of July, along with a lot of my teammates. So I want to give some background to that, help you understand the rationale and really know where we want to take things going forward. Is there anything interesting in the chat window there, Richard? Are you going to call them out, or am I going to try and look at that as well?
Someone just said, got your wings clipped. And there was a question about July 2019 from Matt. What do you mean, Matt?
Was that when you joined GitHub in July last year?
Did I say 2019?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm a schmuck. So 1st of July 2020, as in like 4 weeks, 3 weeks from now, is when the move is official. The unofficial move happened months ago.
Right. Okay.
So I've been working closely, integrating in with the GitHub organization, having to learn how to use Zoom instead of Teams, having to learn how to use Gmail and Google Docs instead of Office 365 is a whole lot of fun. And all that muscle memory is just gone now. It's just bumbling around. So thanks for the call out there on the 2019. That was me being a schmuck. All right. Ignore that. Is this the right deck? Sure, it's the right deck. So what I'm showing you here is for those people that aren't familiar with Azure DevOps. I assume you all are, but with the renaming of the group and the meetup, with Meetup going out there and letting other people know of this group, perhaps there's some people on the call that are really more exclusively GitHub and maybe aren't aware of Azure DevOps. This particular talk is going to compare and contrast them. So that's just a bit of positioning. If you look at the enterprise collaboration solution, there's a lot of things going on that involves a lot of different roles within the organization. You've got a lot of things focused on planning and tracking, a lot of things that fall more squarely into the developer side of things. You've got build and deploy, and then you've also got manual testing. And in calling those out in this way, you can see there's direct correlation into the features of Azure DevOps. For planning and tracking, we have Azure boards. In the area of development, we've got Azure repos, Azure artifacts. For build and deploy, we've got pipelines. And for manual testing, we've got Azure test plans. So we really do work in a lot of different roles across an enterprise. If you think about how software is developed today, over 99% of large enterprise applications leverage open source software. What's wrong with the other 1%? Who knows? But that's a really significant number. How much do we write as a team member on a small team, big team, doesn't matter? How much of the code that we release out to production is code that we have personally crafted? You might be surprised that it could be as little as just 10%. It might be a little bit more, but the majority of code that makes its way out into production for applications we build today isn't stuff we've written. It's stuff that we're building on top of. Contributions usually made by open source members around the world. Okay, coffee. Okay, let's do a coffee analogy. There we go. From the GitHub. They've got good swag.
Geez, have you joined their marketing team?
As soon as we get back to in-person meetings, I'll put the screws on the swag shop and try and get us some shirts and stuff. And I got in trouble because they also sent me a little tin of M&Ms with the GitHub logo on the side. I got in trouble because I ate them. Like, well, what are you gonna do with them, right?
Well, exactly. What else?
Yeah. So if we talk about where that open source software comes, back to the coffee analogy, think about this fictitious company, Coffee Roasters Online. They were actually a bricks and mortar coffee shop. They did their own roasting, but with the pandemic, they've lost a lot of their business. They need to pivot and move across to selling online. So they put a small team together, 3 or 4 people. They're not a big company. And what they want to do is they want to get an e-commerce solution. They decide ASP.NET Core looks really interesting. They do some searching and they see that NopCommerce has been downloaded over 3 million times and looks like it's got all the features we want for an e-commerce solution sitting on ASP.NET. So we go and add that at the start of the project. And that brings into the mix probably 100 contributors and multiple contributions, commits over that time. It has a swag of its own dependencies, things like Humanizer. You add Humanizer and that goes and adds another some number, 150 odd contributors. And of course, we're sitting on ASP.NET Core, which is open source. That adds another 750 contributors and over 42,000 commits. And the list goes on and on and on. So we're we look at a team of 3 or 4, but by using these open source packages and libraries, we're incredibly magnifying the human resources brought to bear on solving the business challenges quite significantly. Just there, I rattle off about 1,000 contributors we've added to the team. That does bring into question, if we're only deploying, if the code we're deploying is only this much code we've written and the rest of it comes from the open source community, we need to start thinking about the software, about the source code supply chain. Where's it coming from? How can we protect it? What's going on there? And of course, the home of open source in the world today is GitHub. So it comes as no surprise then, oh, nice little sizing issue. So it comes as no surprise that in looking at that, Microsoft acquired GitHub a little over 18 months ago. Okay, and in doing that, we want to bring to bear 2 completely different sets of experience and knowledge. Okay, so Azure DevOps is used by thousands of large organizations around the world today. With over 15 years of experience back from when we were TFS, we've learned a lot about enterprise customer needs. Okay, and we've built and earned that trust over that time. On the other side, you've got GitHub. At Satellite recently, they announced there's actually now over 50 million registered users on GitHub. So it's what they know about inner source community and scale from the source code perspective is extraordinary. So if you bring those 2 things together, that has a lot of potential. Okay, interrupt anytime you like. So the vision is to do to do the best we can to integrate those tools together. But where are we really going? Well, first and foremost, GitHub is being run independently as a separate but wholly owned Microsoft business. Our leadership has been the same for at least 18 months. So if you look at the org chart, if you go and find me, if you step up to my manager's manager, you see it's a guy called Nat Friedman, which might ring a bell because he's the CEO of GitHub. So the team that builds Azure DevOps has kind of been under Nat for a long time, sharing resources, sharing engineering, and that started even before the acquisition. Okay, sorry, not the position in the org chart, but the collaboration started very closely with GitHub well before the acquisition. So I want to state something. Microsoft's stated strategic direction is that they want to make GitHub the place where all of the world's developers want to be. Okay, let that sink in for just a minute. We want GitHub to be the place where all of the world's developers want to work. Okay, so what does that mean for Azure DevOps? Well, in the short to medium term, not a lot. Azure DevOps is absolutely not dead. I have seen some Twitter things every now and again and a couple of strange messages from often competitors. Azure DevOps isn't dead. We've got a public roadmap. Anyone can see it. They can see the investments we're making. We're committed to, if we ever choose to deprecate it, which potentially could come. We're going to give customers a minimum of 5 years notice, and we haven't even started those conversations. Okay, there's no anticipation of when we'll start those conversations. So Azure DevOps is in no way dead. Okay, we are innovating, we are adding functionality. We only onboarded some of the largest Microsoft teams to some of that functionality at the end of last year. And quite frankly, the Windows code base can't go across to GitHub because it's too big. So, we need to support and innovate for our own internal teams for a long time to come. But what you are going to see is more innovation arriving more quickly to GitHub. Okay, all the shiny things are going to appear in GitHub either exclusively or certainly earlier is my expectation. In terms of a shared engineering team, Azure DevOps and GitHub share the same leadership. It brings insights and experience from both sides. And we will use that as our standardized engineering across over 100,000 engineers at Microsoft. There's a lot of commonality. If you have a look over here at source control, well, firstly, it's all based on Git. We've got Azure Repos, which has both support for distributed as well as centralized version control. And of course, you've got GitHub, known most well around the world as a source control option. If you look at CI/CD, this one's an interesting story I can share for you. Azure Pipelines is very well liked by the vast majority of Azure DevOps customers. The out-of-the-box experience where you use the classic designer to visually create your CI and CD pipelines, I think is fantastic. It's a great out-of-the-box experience. Okay. Has anyone used Actions V1 from GitHub? No takers? Look, Actions V1 really was a V1 product. But with an internal project, what we did was we actually forked this repo. And we forked it across, and that became, whoops, make that a little smaller, that became Actions V2. That's supposed to be a 2. Gosh darn it. Okay, so Actions V2 is built on the years of learning and experience that our engineers have using pipelines. If you look at the YAML syntax, you'll see that syntactically there's similarities. But we were able to actually change the YAML and improve it, make it a little bit more intuitive, a little bit more standardized. And we were able to do that because there was no legacy requirement. We were released from the constraints of legacy. So Actions V2 is incredibly popular, and already on GitHub, Actions V2 is now the #1 solution for CI/CD across all of GitHub. It only went GA at the end of last year. That's amazing. So that is superseding pipelines and other vendor products as the most widely used CI/CD solution across 50 million user accounts. Okay. I'll talk about this a little bit later, but in helping you position this in your mind, Actions isn't a direct one-to-one mapping of pipelines functionality. In fact, there's a couple of things where pipelines certainly does better today. We continue to innovate and improve GitHub Actions, as we expect to, of course. What is interesting is GitHub Actions is planned to be more than just CI/CD. GitHub Actions is an automation engine and will actually far exceed, in my opinion, the capabilities of Azure Pipelines over time, and we'll be able to do things there that honestly have nothing to do with source. Okay, I'll demonstrate some examples of that for you in the second half of the presentation today. So I think that's really interesting. And then of course, in packages, we've got Azure Artifacts. There's also GitHub packages that we can talk about. But I think CI/CD is one of the more interesting stories I like to talk about. So if you look at the Microsoft sort of ecosystem, the world for delivery, we've got Azure boards for planning our work and those other ones that are hidden underneath the little video heads and things, repos and test plans. Through the introduction or through the integration with GitHub, we add a lot more capability there. Some of the things that we're doing in the security space in GitHub are extraordinary through acquisitions of things like Dependabot and SAML. Some of those security things are really amazing. And there's a lot more as well. So I want to talk about some of the other features and the integration points. What I suspect is that a lot of our companies, or a lot of our customers, if they're using Azure DevOps and enjoying Azure DevOps, they can keep doing that. No problems whatsoever. Some of our early adopters are going and introducing GitHub and utilizing its source control capabilities around inner source mindset, but also a lot of the great security characteristics I'll show you. So today, you might choose to want to move that across in place of Azure repos. Or you might do that 12 months, 2 years from now. It's up to you. Over time, we will make it incredibly easy for customers to choose to move across to GitHub when and if they're ready to do it. You're not going to be pushed. Okay? So any investments we make in Azure DevOps today are very sound investments. In pipelines again, the agents that we talk about. So if you use Microsoft hosted agents, they come in 3 flavors, or you can have self-hosted agents. Imagine if they were called runners and they were GitHub Actions runners. And they coincidentally come with 3 flavors and can also be hosted on-prem. Not really a coincidence, is there? Okay, so there's a lot of similarity which will make it very, very easy for customers to move across when and if they want to. So once this becomes more compelling, I think many customers will want to move over in their own time. Things like work item tracking, that's going to be a lot harder because I actually I love the work item tracking we've got in Azure DevOps, all the different types. Over in GitHub land, kind of everything's an issue, right? They've got a Kanban board, GitHub projects, and it's got a couple of nice things, the way you can go and dynamically create as many as you like, but it's not the same user experience that you can see in Azure DevOps today. So maybe that'll be one of the last things to move across when people choose to or want to. Given our isolation, I thought I'd also take you on a bit of a holiday. Where's this particular photo taken? Any guesses?
One of the Norway?
In the right neck of the woods. So that one was actually Iceland.
Iceland.
Yeah. All right. So Azure boards. Again, I won't go through Azure boards too much with this user group's rename. I'm assuming most of you know what it's all about. Okay. What I'll talk about instead, and I do seriously have the wrong deck here. Damn it. Okay. So how can we integrate boards today if you want to have a look at it? Well, the easiest thing to do is we can go across into GitHub. We can go into the GitHub Marketplace. In the GitHub Marketplace, and guys, this is really easy. I say Azure boards, and I'll get 2 things back. The first of these Marketplace extensions does the integration for us. Okay, it's kind of click, answer a few things, wire it up, done. The other thing I'll show you is GitHub issues to Azure DevOps. Okay, it's got a very, very specific need and requirement. So let me show you what those things might look like. Here's an example of GitHub. I've got Coffee Roasters Online here. We've got all of our source sitting over here. On the other side, we've also got, we've got way too many windows open is what we've really got. Or is it? There. So if I go over here and go into Coffee Roasters Online, so this is Azure DevOps. So I've got everything in Azure DevOps except the source. I've gone and I've added the integration with boards. So if I go across into boards, Go into my sprint backlog. Okay, here's a typical board. I'll say I want to go and create a new task or bug, whatever. This is tasky task face. Oh, spectacular typing. So I can create a oh, it wasn't too bad. So I created an 1862, a normal task. We can do everything we do in Azure DevOps. Okay. And when I'm ready to start work on it, I can bring it across here. 1863, I might jump back to GitHub where the source is. I'll say that I want to go into the source. And of course, normally you're not editing code in a browser. Code spaces maybe. You're normally going to go and pull the repo down. You'll use VS Code, you'll use Visual Studio, whatever you like. So I'll go in here and in the interest of time, I'll say that I want to go and grab a file. I'll edit the file. I'll say Brisbane GitHub user group. Bugug. Damn. Okay. So Bugug it is. And we'll normally go and do all of the wonderful things you normally do, including create a pull request, etc., etc. Okay. Down here, I'll put in my commit message, updated the file, really descript. You see why no one likes being on my team, right? And you'll recall that the work item I'm working on is 1863. So what I can do over in the land of GitHub is I can say this fixes Azure Boards 1863 or resolves, I mean, fixes is normally used for bugs, right? I could have just said resolves Azure Boards 1863, that little bit of syntax there. I can put whatever other notes that I want here, and then I'd do the right thing. I'd create a branch, short-lived branch, I'd do the pull request, etc., etc., etc. But real men commit to master. All right, so I make that commit. Okay, so the commit's gone in there. And if I go back over to boards, you'll see that 1863 has now been marked as closed. So we still get that nice integration between the two things. If I open up that task, you'll see that it still links to the commit that happened over in GitHub. Okay, there it is there. Okay, you know, it's not quite the same experience as if this was all in Azure DevOps. Agreed. You know, there's a couple of nice little features, although I am learning that sometimes people don't know they're there, so they're not going to miss them. Okay, I'm going to have to get rid of that video thumbnail. Gone. Little things like the ability to go in from Azure Boards and create the new short-lived branch straight from here. Okay, that's sweet, right? I like that a lot. So the integration isn't completely seamless, but it's not bad either. I'd classify many of these as sort of paper cuts. It could work out that we want to go the other way. So for anyone that's doing a lot of work over in GitHub, you'll be familiar with the idea of issues. Everything's an issue. So I can create a new issue. And that issue is Richard needs a barber badly. Everyone agree? Of course they do.
You've been speaking to my wife, haven't you?
So we go and create that issue in Azure, sorry, over in GitHub, completely in GitHub land, and I'll submit it. And you've got all the capabilities here. I can assign it. I can put my labels in there, specify milestones, all of that you can do. Okay. And if I rub my hands together and take a sip from the magic GitHub cup, there we go. It was going to be a long sip. Did you notice what happened there? AB 1864. So I created an issue in GitHub. It went across to Azure DevOps. And in Azure DevOps, if I have a look at my work items over here, you'll see the issue has been created and we get that linkage between them. Now, that's actually an action. And as an action, it had nothing to do with source code. we wrote an action, and it's open source. You can see all the source code that goes across there. So if you wanted to integrate it in other ways, if you wanted to go and wire up different behaviors, if you wanted to have a look at the labels and create a different work item type over in Azure DevOps, you can. The code's all there. Okay, so that's not bad. And this particular integration hasn't been out there that long. So it will be iterated on, it'll mature, give us better capabilities. All right, any questions about the boards integration so far?
The one thing I noticed there that I thought was pretty cool too, in Azure DevOps, it actually tagged it as well. So it gave it some good tags. I think that's pretty sweet.
Yeah. All right. All right. Anyone want to guess on that one? A couple of landmarks there you might recognize. Where's that photo from on our virtual holiday?
No idea.
Oops, someone's in the chat window, Richard.
Steve said Canberra.
Black Mountain, I think.
Canberra. Interesting. Actually, that does look a bit like the Telstra Tower in Canberra, doesn't it? That's quite good.
I assume it's not.
That's not, no. So that's actually taken in Seoul in November last year, I think that was. That's looking out the window of my hotel room at the Hyatt in Seoul. Okay. Lovely place to visit. All right, sending issues. So I've shown that one to you already. That one's less interesting. That's just some of the flowers in the Microsoft Office, the new Microsoft Office in Singapore. We'll skip that one. There's other ways of integrating things. And when we start talking about some of the great strengths of GitHub, security comes to mind very, very quickly. I want to be clear, some of the security I'll talk about is available in GitHub Enterprise Cloud or GitHub Enterprise Server. But at the very high end, there's GitHub Advanced Security and GitHub One. And these will cost, you definitely have to pay quite a lot more for those high-end dynamic security analysis tools, okay? I don't want to turn this into a licensing conversation, but just to be completely transparent, any decent security tool is certainly not free. And you've got a lot of static analysis tools out there. CodeQL is a dynamic, has this amazing dynamic capability. It uses CodeQL. It automatically builds your code itself. It observes how it's built. It then builds a database of your code, not only the code itself, but the way data flows through it into a database. And you query the database. And it's an extraordinary way of doing things. I'll talk about that one a little bit later on, but I guess you get what you pay for. And this one I think's expensive, but amazing. So that's not what I should be talking about. So one of the other things we can do is when we do some of the vulnerability scans, things like Dependabot, if there is a vulnerability found, we can also go and push those across into Azure boards. So someone finds a vulnerability, it's automatic. If a vulnerability is found, it can push a card straight out to Azure boards, along with other forms of notification, email, and the like. I talked about Dependabot. Let's just have a look at what that is in case you're not aware. So Dependabot was an acquisition that GitHub made a little while ago. And what it's designed to do is, it's firstly, the majority of these tools I'm showing you right now are available free in open source or public repos. Okay, so Dependabot is constantly scanning the code base, and it is looking for any vulnerabilities in the dependencies that you have. Oh, some new stuff at JB Hi-Fi, awesome. Go away. You too. Okay. So if we think about, we go and add this package has dependencies on these 5 packages, which have dependencies on these 20 packages. The dependency tree grows very quickly and often quite, exponentially. So Dependabot looks through these things and it can identify where you've taken dependencies on a version of a package that has a known vulnerability. You don't want to do this just in your CI/CD pipeline. I could place this capability into a pipeline, and as part of that pipeline, we identify something, we fix it, we run the pipeline again, all good, we deploy. And maybe we don't touch that application now for another couple of months. A day after we deployed it, a vulnerability in one of our dependencies was identified. It's not going to get picked up because we're not running the CI/CD pipeline for months yet. So by simply having our source here, it's constantly looking at the source. It can identify when you've set a reference to a package now with a known vulnerability. It says, hey, there's an issue here, there's a problem. And we go, okay, now thanks for letting me know. Now I'll go and bump the version number, rebuild it, get it out there and deploy it quickly before that vulnerability is potentially exploited by bad actors. Notifying people or maintainers, you think that might be enough? You'd think. But what we found is less than 30% of maintainers, when they were notified of a vulnerability in a dependency, actually went and fixed it. Okay, we need to do more. So when we find that when Dependabot finds an issue, Dependabot goes further. If I go into these branches, you'll see there are multiple branches here, each with a specific identity. If I go and have a look at the pull requests, Dependabot automatically creates a PR for me with the fix. Remember, it's looking at dependent packages with vulnerabilities, and as soon as they're fixed, it could be as easy as bump the version number, recompile and build your application, rerun your unit tests to make sure nothing else is broken. So each of these PRs includes the code required, and it's not much code, by the way, to bump the dependency to avoid the vulnerability. So have a look at it, test it, and if you're happy, go ahead and merge that pull request in. So it doesn't just notify you, it offers you a fix wherever it can. Okay, that's Dependabot. So if I go back over to, whoops, wrong one. No surprises there. Sorry. And what I wanted to say there is when we identify that with integration, we can also go and create a task over in Azure DevOps. We can assign it to someone if you wish and say, hey, you need to go and investigate this, have a look at the pull request, have a look at the issue, and you'll probably, hopefully, want to fix that quickly and maybe redeploy. Okay, that's another point of integration. Okay, that one's really nondescript, and I'm coming up with a theme here. That was another Iceland photo. And when you contemplate circumnavigating Iceland and you think, I don't want to pay that exorbitant amount for a four-wheel drive, turns out your little family sedan isn't great on these roads. And changing tires in the pouring down rain after you've got several punctures isn't fun either. Something to learn.
Well, not fun for you.
Correct. Shane didn't mind. She was in the hotel still having a late breakfast, a coffee. I was getting soaked to the bone.
And she wasn't there to laugh at you. That's disappointing.
Oh, she was there in spirit, chuckling away. All right. Any questions about what I've shown you just there for that integration? For any of you that don't present, I mean, in this different world that we're in right now, the lack of feedback is really, really disconcerting as a presenter. That's not a criticism in any way, but not being able to sort of look out, at your smiling faces, sniggering faces, or deep frowns, it definitely takes something away from the presentations. Okay.
I was wondering how you're going to handle that because I certainly know even on our internal meetings, people have a propensity to shut up. It's tough, but you're doing well.
Thanks, Richard. And the other thing is if the speaker's not engaging you and not entertaining you with something interesting, it's really easy for us just to, we get a notification, we click and we look at our emails, and it's really easy to tune out. whereas being in a room, you're more present in the moment. So these are challenges I experience, I'm sure we all do, where you're taking so much more in through this unidirectional medium. Okay, back to the topic. Azure pipelines. So if you're an Azure DevOps user, you probably like pipelines a lot. Customer satisfaction for pipelines, I expect, I'm pretty sure I've seen figures that show in terms of customer sat, this is the highest component of Azure DevOps that our customers love. So you can integrate pipelines quickly and easily. This one was a food bazaar in Amman, Jordan. And it's not uncommon for people just to come up and grab a handful and eat as they walk past, and that's completely acceptable, which was unusual. You'd get in all sorts of trouble here. Okay. So, pipelines. If I go back over to too many things, to this one, and I go back to Marketplace, you saw me type Azure Boards before. If I type Azure Pipelines, you'll see there are also two things. Firstly, the thing that gives you integration so that you can include GitHub in your pipelines quickly and easily, and also a tool here that is an action that goes and triggers an Azure pipeline. So based on other actions and activities that might be happening in GitHub, you can then go and say, hey, go over to Azure DevOps and trigger that pipeline for me. So they're two particularly useful integrations. Okay, the first of them, if I go back to Azure DevOps, if I go and have a look in my pipelines, it's really, the integration's quite seamless. Not completely perfect, it does have a couple of paper cuts and rough edges. So if you have a look here, I've got some classic pipelines doing all their work. I actually do have some source. I sneakily do have a little bit of source over here for part of a different demonstration. But this one at the top here, I go in and I say I want to have a look at this particular, okay, ignore that, at this particular, guess who had to rebuild his machine completely from scratch yesterday? So all of these things are not actually set up on this machine yet. Sorry about that. All right, there we go. So what you can see here is, here's my pipeline. Okay, some of you may recognize some of the tools from the Microsoft Security Analysis tools here. So where we go and run cred scan, create the report, publish the analysis logs, etc. But the interesting thing is that up here, we go and store the YAML file in GitHub. The source repository itself is over in GitHub, but we get to use pipelines in all of its glory as a native solution here. So it's kind of really hard to demonstrate. There's not much there to see insofar as if I want to go in there and say I want to create a new CI/CD pipeline, I can simply point it to a repository. It'll interrogate the repository. It'll say, oh, this looks like ASP.NET Core, or this looks like a Java application, or it looks like something else. And it will create or offer a default template up for me to go and do that compile, much the same way that Azure DevOps does. So that side of things integrates very, very well. There are a couple of little things that I've found that are a little bit frustrating. Not from this side of it, but if I was working on a pipeline, I've got this run button up here. So I'm doing some work, I've made some changes, I want to test it, I click run, easy. You know, there's actually no manual trigger for actions for workflows in GitHub today, which wasn't seen as an issue or a problem, But for people coming from Azure DevOps that are used to it, it's huge. It's like, what do you mean I've got to go and do something or check something in? I just want to run the workflow. No. It is on the roadmap. I think that one is due out this quarter. Next quarter. Okay, but hopefully early in the next quarter, so that we'll be able to go and manually trigger those actions, particularly where those actions aren't always going to be sourced, they aren't always going to be CI/CD. It could just be an action where we do some notifications, some automatic tagging. We might go and do all sorts of things. Being able to manually trigger them, I think, how it's not there surprised me. But it's, we're learning and we're putting those things into place. All right, back over there. So that's pipelines. Yeah, no, turns out I used a lot of Iceland photos in this one. So 10 minutes to go. So I wanted to leave 10 minutes there for Q&A, for conversation. So to wrap up, we've provided an insight into why Richard and I have discussed the rename, why we want to do that. Calling it the Azure DevOps and GitHub user group was just too long. We bandied around some ideas and decided to move across and just call it the GitHub user group. I talked about Azure DevOps and GitHub futures. We talked about Microsoft's strategic direction and how Microsoft's goal is that people will want to go to GitHub over time. There are definitely feature gaps there today. So I'd be surprised if too many teams, up and move entirely to GitHub, unless you're using only a small subset of Azure DevOps. I pointed out that there's some nice integrations there today in case you did want to start looking at some of the great features available in GitHub. I talked briefly, but didn't go into any detail, on some of the security capabilities. If I look at this particular application, I can go across to Security Center. I can set up my security policies. I can go and create security advisories. GitHub are a CVE numbering authority. So if I've got an open source package, I'm notified of a vulnerability, I can create a private branch, get that fixed, get that rolled out. I can then notify and create a security advisory directly from GitHub. My dependable alerts allow me to say, go and email these people, do these sorts of things when we find issues with our dependencies. But there's others down the bottom there. Detect secrets. So it's saying that we've scanned your code, and it's really it's a very smart scanner. It said, we have found Microsoft Azure Active Directory user credentials. It doesn't just say, oh, this is a fishy string, it looks a bit weird. It's got these amazing smarts built into it to give it context. And it's able to say, well, hey, you've got these kind of credentials in there, that's probably a bad idea. Okay, further than that, between it and CodeQL, we also, for private repos, I think it's in private beta today, we can go out to, with this one, I think it's 25 different vendors, and we can say, hey, hang on, secrets have leaked into the code here. We can either disable or suspend those secrets automatically. It's up to the administrator if they want that behavior to happen. But if someone goes and drops a SAS key or a token or something into the code base, and now that's spreading its way out as people do their normal Git work, the ability to automatically close that risk vector quickly with appropriate notifications, I think is really a compelling story for many. I mentioned CodeQL from the acquisition with Semel. So CodeQL is also working here. Technically, it's an action. And an action is triggering it automatically. CodeQL, of course, is a very large separate product. It goes further. It's identified some hard-coded credentials. It's identified and looked at unsafe practices. As I say, it builds your code. It observes it all dynamically, looking at things. It creates a database. And then, some of the smartest security researchers around the world create these queries and share them. CodeQL is a lot more than just security, although that's what most of the industry sees it as, very much about security. but it can go and just look for any bad practices. It can look for coding patterns. It can look for like an if-then block or an if-then else where the else is doing nothing. Okay. While I'm presenting, that really should make those things stay away. And the other thing, in terms of this security center, anything under the alerts here, any tool that outputs SARF can also report here. So under security center, we've got a single pane of glass. Okay. So I just remembered that I didn't talk about that one. All right. So any questions while we wrap up?
So we have a question from Matt Core. Is there much effort involved to migrate from YAML pipelines to GitHub Actions?
Ooh, it depends a little bit. There is, actually, it's a guy out of New Zealand. There is a website that does the YAML converter. And I think it purports to do about 90% of that syntactical conversion for you. Again, it's going to depend on exactly what you're doing with those YAML pipelines, what tasks are you using, are there equivalent or matching tasks available in Actions. So I guess it could be a little bit of work, could be a little bit more work, or it could be next to none. It kind of depends a little bit. If anyone wants, just ping me and I'll grab that URL for you. It's like pipelines to actions.azurewebsite.com or something along those lines. I can find that for you quickly. Azure DevOps Git repo, is that stored in GitHub or somewhere else? Somewhere else. So Steve, the Git repos that are part of Azure DevOps Today are stored in Azure DevOps Today. If you want to move the source across, it could be a simple thing of simply pulling down the repo, change the origin, push it back up again. That's probably overly simplifying it, because remember, all those commit IDs and the links that you might have back to work items, those won't carry across when they go to GitHub. So the source and all of its history will be maintained. That's quite easy, but there may be a cost there that it needs to be considered. A human cost, not a dollar cost. Lofty, a good question there about if we're at the start of the DevOps journey right now, Azure DevOps journey, would it be better pivoting now directly to integrate the GitHub experience? Short answer, yes, is my opinion. Okay, I can share, Lofty, I assume you're probably under an NDA with Microsoft, so it's not quite public, but it's not quite private either. We've got a decision maker's guide that I can share with you separately offline. I'll show you my email if you haven't already got it before in a moment. So short answer is I'd start looking at it now. Start gaining the benefits of GitHub today. It's not going to hurt you. Start using Actions today. Not going to hurt you. So if you're at the start, do both. If you're on Azure DevOps already, you can continue to invest there and do integration. But yeah. Oh, excellent. Okay. I'd be seriously looking at the GitHub experience today. Yeah. I think so. Are the coffee cups available to the public? I think so. So the online store, so GitHub are really cool with their stuff. So I get to go to the swag store and I get to get a couple of things that just get shipped to me. There's no, on checkout, there's no dollars. It's really nice. So they're a great company to work for in that regard. I believe you can get these things publicly. And as I say, they're really an amazing company for supporting the community. So for future presentations, I'm going to try and get Mish Menes to come along and, oh, thanks, Marco. I'm going to try and get Mish Menes to do a presentation. She's the Australian community manager for these things. So she'll be a good one to hit up for some of those. Oh, Marco's right on this. Thanks. If we're moving from TFS 2018 as our starting point for repos, I guess he's got a couple of very loud birds outside. Are we better off migrating or starting from scratch? So if you're in 2012, I assume you're probably TFVC, centralized version control. Is that right? Yeah. that's a tough one. So if the source code's in TFS 2012, there's probably a lot of things in there. I'd suggest that you've got some good things and some things that have changed. So maybe your branching structures change. Maybe there's been staff turnover. Maybe a lot of the history is not as relevant as it was. Maybe if it was my code, I really wouldn't want to bring the history across and have that evidence available. So I guess sometimes it's nice to start from scratch. Other times, we've got to support existing applications. We can't get rid of the source. So maybe all new work, do a tip migration into GitHub, all new work happens over here. We simply switch this over to read-only, and the historical reference is there for anyone to go back and look at. If we are resurrecting one of these or it needs some new work done, maybe we then simply bring the tip over and start work over here as well. That's a nice way of cleaning house and maybe setting up the structures, naming conventions, setting them back to something that's more more modern. Guys, I'm going to have to do a hard stop. I've got to jump onto another call straight away. Any parting thoughts, Richard?
Thanks a lot for doing that for us today, Anthony. That's really, really good. And thank you all for turning up to our first meeting of 2020. We will be having one once a month now. So thank you very, very much for all turning up, and keep an eye out for the next meetings.